Hello everyone and welcome back to another video on the channel. Today we're going to be talking about one of my most anticipated movies of the year, and that is Black Panther: Wakanda Forever. And I will be doing something slightly different than I normally do today. I will be doing a non-spoiler section first, and then I'll get into spoilers later on in the video. So if you want to skip ahead to that, there will be time codes down at the bottom there, so you can go ahead and skip there if you just want the spoilers. But let's just talk about my overall thoughts on this film. So let's start off with the elephant in the room. This movie, of course, has to deal with the passing of Chadwick Boseman earlier in 2020, which is an absolute tragic loss, and you can really feel it in this film. You can feel his presence, just missing from this film, and I will say that is one thing that I'll be getting more into with spoilers with how that is handled. But I will want to kind of address the thing that people are talking about with recasting T'Challa or, going on without him, and I think that what they did with this film was very smart. They weaved through it really well, and I think my favorite part about this film and about the journey of getting this film is the fact that Ryan Coogler himself and the entire cast and everybody who knew Chadwick Boseman had this moment and had this time to actually grieve and to not ignore the passing of Chadwick Boseman, because to recast and to move on without him would just feel like it'll almost feel disrespectful, because you have to honor what has come before while also trying to forge a path forward with the way that you can. And to see his grief on display in this film is present throughout the entire thing. And so when it comes to Coogler's direction, you really do feel that tone and that pacing, and just the feel of this movie is a result of his grief. And when you get the performances in this movie, it is also a result of that grief. And there are some powerhouse performances in this entire movie. Of course, Letitia Wright and Angela Bassett are just phenomenal in this movie. Danai is so good, and Lupita Nyong'o is phenomenal as well. Everybody involved in the making of this movie had a chance to take what happened in the real life and put their pain into the art. And I think when you're able to do that as an artist, it feels like something special. And I think in that way, I'm glad that they chose the direction of this movie in the dire circumstances that they were. Ryan Coogler was dealt with an impossible task of trying to figure out how to move forward with this, and it would have been easier to quit. It would have been easier to ignore what happened, but to embrace it and to have a nice tribute and to have just such beautiful moments in this film around this subject. It's so great to see on big screen coming from an audience member that is disconnected from that. So when you get a direct connection from somebody who knew Chadwick Boseman, it just makes it feel much greater. And one of my favorite parts about the first film was how Coogler kind of guided us through Wakanda and how it built that world to such amazing heights. It felt so fantastical, but also so grounded in reality. It feels like a place on Earth, but at the same time, it feels like something that's not tangible. It feels so fantastical that you're just in awe watching it. And so when you get this film, Wakanda still does feel magical. It does feel like this place that I want to go to. It feels like a place that I want to exist in real life. And when he explores the world of Talokan in this film, you also get that awe-inspiring just wonder of the worlds that he creates in this movie. And I think that is why you get a director like Ryan Coogler to balance those themes with that world building, with his beautiful direction and the cinematography in this film and the musical score. It all just comes together in a film that Ryan Coogler really did craft the best he possibly could have under the circumstances. And although this movie might not be as smooth of a ride as that first film was, because yes, this movie is missing the glue that held together that first film. It's missing Chadwick Boseman. It's missing Michael B. Jordan that kind of drives those films to the heights that it was. Even though it is missing that, this movie does still bring you on a great journey. I love the story. I love the things with Talokan and that conflict with Wakanda, which I'll get into in the spoiler section. I loved what they did with the characters and the performances. Like I said, all the music and everything just came together into a film that I just really, really enjoyed watching, despite its long runtime. Because yes, you do feel that at times, but overall, the story choices that they went with, I really, really did like. So I do want to get into spoilers at this point in the video. If you've not seen the movie, I would highly recommend it, especially if you're a fan of that first film. I don't think it's as good, sadly, but I do think that this is such a great film experience to kind of watch in theaters. I'm watching in Dolby again tonight because I want to experience that again, because it is just such an interesting piece that I'm curious to see how I feel about it on second watch, because it really did hit me hard. It can be overwhelming with how much this movie does, and so let's just get into those spoilers and talk about all the little details in it. First thing I want to talk about is Shuri. Shuri is a character that I really did like in that first film, and I will say, when I rewatched Black Panther just a week ago, I watched it with the director commentary from Ryan Coogler, which I would love to see another director's commentary for this film as well from Coogler, and maybe even some of the cast members. But he said in that movie, when Shuri joined the final battle, he said, "Oh, Shuri has the potential of becoming a great warrior queen. That is her potential. And even back then, when people say, oh, she's just kind of the guy in the chair type of person, she's the one that is dealing with the technology, she kind of scoffs at tradition, she doesn't, kind of believe in all these things that T'Challa believes in. She's a very different character. And so how do you bring that character into a point where you're putting her through all the things that she goes through in this movie, and what does she become by the end of it? And she becomes the next Black Panther, and she becomes the next warrior for Wakanda, and it feels very earned. So this movie really does start with an absolute gut punch with Shuri's character. Essentially, it starts off with her trying to recreate that heart-shaped herb that Michael B. Jordan's character burned all in the last movie, and T'Challa has this unknown illness that is just absolutely unstoppable, even to Wakanda, which is absolutely heartbreaking to see Shuri, the smartest person as of this point in the MCU, trying to recreate this thing to possibly heal him. And then when her mother comes in and says that he has passed, it is absolutely crushing, and then it turns into a celebration of his life and just a tribute to him with the funeral. And it really does set up Shuri's character in a very interesting way, because she's praying to her god, something that she doesn't really believe in, because in the last film she's kind of scoffing at the tradition. Like I said, she doesn't really believe in the things that T'Challa believes in. She's more on that scientific side, and so she's trying to use science to heal him instead of being there with him in his final moments, which is absolutely heartbreaking to see her journey and how that really does mess her up throughout this entire movie. When it comes to Shuri's journey, it really is a journey of, somebody that's struggling with their faith in not only their worldviews, but also in themselves. She doesn't trust herself. She doesn't believe that she can be something greater than she already is. She's stuck in her technological world. She's kind of cooped up in her lab. She hasn't really gone out to do anything. And when she does finally get back onto the field, doing missions, trying to save Riri Williams, and going through all this, terror that Namor's character puts her through in this movie, she is just such a great grounding point for this film, because you are really following it through her perspective throughout the entire thing. And I think that her journey of kind of losing her faith, trying to desperately find it, and when she does get that heart-shaped herb and she becomes the next Black Panther, what does she see in her vision other than Michael B. Jordan? He is actually in this movie in the spiritual realm. And when you have a character like Shuri going through this experience, and she's so desperate to see her family again, and instead she's placed with Michael B. Jordan in the spiritual realm, what does she do? She's going to even lose more faith, because she's so consumed with that anger and that vengeance that she can't see clearly. She kind of goes through a similar story that T'Challa goes through in Civil War, even a deeper exploration of that, because it is solely focused on her rather than that being kind of the B plot in Civil War. But it's just done in such a beautiful way, to a point where when she does confront Namor in all these different ways, in her relationship with Namor, that was at first kind of shipping them together. It's like, I kind of want to see this possible new queen of Wakanda and this new, this king of Tenoch, and see them kind of working together. I wanted that. I was striving for that. But when Namor does the things that he does in this movie, that pisses me off, then you just really see that anger and that drive to get revenge against Namor for what he does. So when I talk about Namor in this movie, he's probably my favorite part in this film, because God, what a great villain he was. And I kind of struggle using the term villain, because like I said, for that first half of the movie, I was honestly on the side of Talokan. So essentially why Talokan is being introduced into this world at this point is, when Wakanda kind of unveiled all their secrets to the world and showed that they had vibranium, the whole world is striving for that power, especially the United States. There's even a scene with Queen Ramonda in the UN, and they're kind of being attacked by these different soldiers, and it turns out to be the French trying to get hold of these Wakandan weapons. And she gives this powerful speech where, even though we lost our king and our warrior, it does not mean Wakanda is weak. And even though they still have all that strength, they've unveiled all to the world that they need this power that they're striving for. So they're looking for all this vibranium in different places, and so they're looking into the ocean. They see that Talokan had another meteor with vibranium. They have created this whole civilization underwater, and now their secrets of Talokan is about to be revealed, and Namor does not want that to happen. He wants to keep their society outside of the outside world, because he does not like outsiders. He does not like the surface world in any way, because of his past with his mother and just all the terrible things that he has seen on the surface, and how confined he is underwater, and how content he essentially is. And to have that possible threat of unveiling this world to the outsiders is absolutely terrifying to him, because he wants it to be on his terms. If he's going to go out onto the surface world, it's going to be to take over. It's going to be to go to war with these outsiders, and with their existence being threatened because of the Wakandans, that puts them in direct conflict with them. But he also wants to work with Wakanda, because he doesn't know if they're a great ally yet, or if they're his greatest enemy. And so when him and Shuri are talking in Talokan in that entire middle portion of the movie in the second act, I was really invested in these characters. And when NAKIA shows up to save Shuri and Riri Williams in Talokan, you get to see kind of how she works, how she kind of integrates herself into a society, how she kind of infiltrates and sneaks into this place, how she researches, and you get to see a lot about kind of the history of Talokan and the history of Namor through this investigation, because I just love the way that this kind of weaved into the story. But when they are rescued from Talokan, and then Namor goes crazy and he goes in and attacks Wakanda. This is my favorite sequence, like action beat in the movie, because they do an absolute they ransack Wakanda in a terrible way. All the heroes of the movie are trying to save all these civilians that are just kind of trying not to drown in the city as it's flooding. It is absolutely terrifying to see how Namor works in the action and how he uses his little tiny like feet wings to jump around and attack these ships. It is really cool. It could come off as really goofy, but it doesn't. It is really awesome. I love to see how Namor works in terms of the action sequences. It's really fun to watch. But when he goes up to Ramonda and he blows up that window and he kills Queen Ramonda in this movie, I was livid. I was so mad at his character. I went from almost completely on his side because I liked his arguments with Shuri and why he's the way he is, why he wants, this scientist that had, Talokan discovered by these outsiders. I liked his motivations and all that, and I just wanted them to work together. But as soon as he killed the queen and Shuri was not able to save her, it was just absolutely heartbreaking, because how much loss can Shuri go through in this movie with the loss of her brother, the loss of her father in the last movie, and now the loss of her mother in this movie it is rough. It is so tough to watch. And that was just that final push to make Shuri make that heart-shaped herb in order to face off of Namor to get her revenge as the Black Panther. And it was very satisfying. I loved that fight that they had. It was absolutely ruthless. It was brutal. And to kind of see how even the people of Talokan, the army of Talokan, and how they were attacking that ship that all the Wakandans were in that final battle, and to see how formidable this, this civilization is, they beat the Wakandans in almost every right. The only difference, or the only thing that stopped them essentially, is the fact that Shuri defeated Namor and he yielded, and he now feels like he has this ally in Wakanda. Even though all the things that they went through in this movie, one of his final lines is like, okay, now they're a strong ally of ours in this possible war against the people above the surface. And so I don't know where they're going to go with Namor's character. I find him absolutely fascinating. He pissed me off, but I'm also on his side at the same time. He is a great character that they've introduced into the MCU, and I love his power sets. I love the people of Talokan, and just, it's fascinating to me. I also really liked how they weaved Ironheart into the story, with Riri Williams developing that technology to kind of track vibranium, and so she creates this machine that kind of starts this entire conflict. She's the inciting incident of this movie, and she's the MacGuffin, essentially. She's the one that all the villains are going after, all the heroes are going after, and she gets a chance to create her technology and perfect it in Wakanda, and it's taken away from her at the end so she can have her own little movie. You get a little backstory with her father, and her mother. You get a little itsy bitsy pieces of that you're going to get in her show, but I thought that it was a very natural way to introduce that. And when it comes to Phase 4 of the MCU, it dealt with grief in everything that has happened up into this point into the MCU, with, the blip and all those sort of things, with the loss of Chadwick Boseman in particular with this movie, but also dealt with introductions of all the new heroes that we're going to get in Phase 5 and Phase 6. And so this one with Riri Williams' character was a great introduction to see where she goes into the future, because if you look at Phase 5, and I hear a lot of people complaining about what Phase 4 was, I really do see it as an introduction into what we're going to get into the future. So no, it didn't have some big Avengers movie to end off the phase, but it had the most emotionally gratifying movie in that phase to cap it all off. And although I've been praising this movie for almost my entire review here, there are some pitfalls, there are some negatives that I have for this film, and I think that not all these storylines work as well as the main storylines with Shuri and Queen Ramonda and Namor and all that stuff. There is a storyline with Danai that starts off very strong. I loved her dynamic with Shuri and how she wanted to bring her out into the field, and when she loses her, the queen strips her of all her titles, and that is a very hard moment to watch for this character, because that is what she has been fighting for since the first movie. She stood by her country, even when Michael B. Jordan's character took over, when Killmonger took over in that first film, she stood with her country despite the leader not being, a good person. And so she deals with all these things. She's banished, and she kind of loses everything that she's fought her entire life to keep. But then they go with her character in this storyline where Shuri's been developing this new suit for possibly the Dora Milaje. And these suits are fine. It's kind of like a mix between the type of weaponry that the Dora Milaje already uses, the spears, and a type of look that they have, but it's also blue this time, and it has some Iron Man tech so they can fly around, and they have this like helmet that goes onto their face so you don't really see the performance underneath it. You don't get to see the women fighting. So maybe it's a scheduling thing where they couldn't have her the entire time, so they had to cover her face in these final action sequences. I don't know. I don't think the look of these things is my favorite. I really like the mask and the look of the eyes and how vibrant it is. I just kind of miss the look of the Dura Milaje, because obviously they are still in this final battle. It's just Danai Gurira's character and the new character played by Michaela Coel. These are the characters that are donning these new suits. I don't hate them. I don't mind them too much. I just, the direction that they went with them kind of being this new thing, I'm not sure about yet. There also is the subplot with the Americans, so of course they're going to have Everett Ross back in this movie, and I thought he was weaved much better into that first film with that whole thing with Claw and that introduction to Wakanda and how you kind of see this world through his eyes. I think it worked really well in the first film. In this one, he is still an ally to the Wakandans. He's kind of giving intel from the CIA to the Wakandans, which kind of makes him a traitor in the eyes of the US, and he apparently is the ex of Valentina, whatever her name is, the one who's going to be the leader of the Thunderbolts. I don't really know how I feel about that character because her tone and her performance does not fit into this movie. I can see the Thunderbolts movie being that tone, that performance that she's giving, and her performance working in that. Just from what I've seen of her character so far in Falcon Winter Soldier, in Black Widow, and now this, I just don't know if I like her character yet. I don't really get her points, and she just does not fit into the tone and the feel of this film. I didn't really like that storyline at all. I kind of wish that they kind of did without that. It feels very much like the only element of this movie that's pushing forward to what's going to happen next in the MCU, whereas everything else is focusing on this story alone. And so that stuff just didn't work out. It kind of made that pacing and that kind of tone kind of not balance as well as the first film did. And I also do want to talk about that post-credit scene with Shuri kind of finally burning the garments of T'Challa from, you know, the funeral and all that stuff, finally moving forward. She decides to not be queen. She decides to kind of pass off the mantle of the throne to M'Baku, who I didn't talk about in this review. M'Baku is great. I love Winston Duke. He brings so much levity in this movie. I love his character, and he's going to be king of Wakanda now, so I absolutely love that. I think that's a great choice because Shuri, she's still going through a lot. She still has her journey that she's going to be going through. I do feel like she works really well as the warrior of Wakanda, but not necessarily the queen of Wakanda, because she doesn't have those beliefs and tradition that somebody like M'Baku is going to have. Somebody who's going to be looked up as a greater king than she would be looked up as a queen. And so I think that is a very fitting end. So she goes to go with NAKIA into Haiti, and you get introduced to T'Challa's son. I'm not exactly sure what the time frame of this must be. I think, you know, they must have had this kid probably before Infinity War, probably around that time period where she's not in it. I think that is why she's off during Infinity War and Endgame, taking care of this child, keeping this kid away from the pressures of the throne and from all those things. She's able to live her life in Haiti, separate from all of that stuff, to kind of raise this kid. And they were aware of T'Challa's illness, and so they kind of had to keep their distance. They weren't there at the funeral because of not wanting to reveal the secret to the world at large just yet. They want to keep him hidden, essentially. And so now you have Shuri and NAKIA, and now this new Prince T'Challa that is going to be the new future of Wakanda. So eventually they'll be able to kind of, in some way, recast T'Challa without, you know, getting rid of the character that we have come to know and love with Chadwick Boseman. So I think that is a very great way to kind of pave the path for the future. So we will eventually have a new King T'Challa, you know, some points down the line, but for right now we're going to have Shuri as a Black Panther. We're going to get those storylines with T'Challa that people are going to kind of want, because people kind of do want that recast T'Challa thing, which I think that's, if they did it now, wouldn't have been right. Down the line, I think with this new character, kind of respecting that history with Chadwick Boseman, but also paving a path forward with this new T'Challa is a great way to do it. So what did you guys think of Black Panther Wakanda Forever? There's a lot in this movie. It is so interesting to watch the way that Ryan Coogler weaved through this difficult times in order to make this film such a heartfelt, grief-stricken movie that's just really does balance all these things as best as it possibly could. So let me know in the comments down below what you thought of this film, and how would you rank the MCU? I'll probably have a video out later this week ranking all of the Marvel movies, including Phase 4 up until this point. I'm very excited to make that video. So thanks everybody for watching. Subscribe to the channel if you want to see more reviews just like this one. I hope to see you all in my next one.